one of the Middle East scholars, Lynch 2013, reveals that Saudi Arabia made it clear to the Obama administration that Bahrain must be under the influence of Al Saud or of Saudi Arabia. In Bahrain, in 2011, in the beginning of 2011, was as a Saudi state. You will find the Saudi flags and everywhere, Saudi slogans and everywhere. So it was really invaded. Like even Al Khalifa family are not that brutal, but because of the influence of Saudi Arabia, they wouldn't be able to do anything. Saudi Arabia intervened into Bahrain and actually invaded it. Now, before I talk about Al Jazeera coverage, let's know where Al Jazeera is and what's the context and background of establishing Al Jazeera in order to be able to speak about Al Jazeera coverage. Al Jazeera actually is based in Qatar. Qatar is a Gulf state country, is the biggest ally to Bahrain and to the United States. It has a very big military or American military base in Qatar. Actually, the first rocket was launched against Iraq was from Qatar, was from this military base. So Al Jazeera was established in, or the idea of Al Jazeera came in 1994 when BBC Arabic was established. BBC Arabic was established in 1994. They criticized the royal family in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia got upset, so they cancelled BBC completely. In 1995, the Emir, the Qatari Emir, was enjoying his time on a vacation, so his son declared himself as a new Emir. He declared himself as a president in a court. Simple like that. So a British administrator named Al Thani family the thugs of the Gulf, who come to power either by a coup or shedding blood. So that was normal in Qatar. Like the father went on a vacation, the son declared himself as a new emir, and the father prevented them from coming into the country. After this, Saudi Arabia, because they were friends with the previous emir, that's why they defended the previous emir, and that's why there are some of competition now between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They agree with each other and they differ with each other. Like for example, in Syria, they agree. About Libya, they agree. About Bahrain, they agree. But in Egypt, they differ with each other. So there are sort of rivalry between them. Anyway, Al Jazeera was established in 1996 as a sign of democratization, and the new emir dissolved the Ministry of Information just to introduce Al Jazeera as a new movement to establish democracy in the country. Sheikh Hamad Al Thani, the new emir, gave Al Jazeera $137 million. And another scholar says that the network still receives $300 million annually from the emir. Well, I have just 5 minutes and I haven't even finished the half of my presentation. So, Al Jazeera, why Al Jazeera was established? Al Jazeera, first of all, was established to challenge the domination of Saudi Arabia's ruler. As we say, like they are, in the same region, but they are rivals at the same time. There are competition between them. So Qatar gave part of Al Jazeera to the Muslim Brotherhood organization, which has always had unstable relations with Saudi Arabia. If you watch Al Jazeera, especially Al Jazeera Arabic, if you watch their programs, a lot of their presenters are from the Muslim Brotherhood, and if you watch their coverage now on Egypt, you will find they are in the favor of the Muslim Brotherhood. Al Jazeera was the only channel which was presenting Bin Laden or Bin Laden tapes. So the king or the emir of Qatar is very smart. He would give the air Qatar. And surprisingly, Bin Laden would criticize every military base in the Gulf states and in the world, and he wouldn't even mention the military base in Qatar. So, the Emir, I like the Emir of Qatar, the previous Emir. He's smart. He's a smart guy. So Qatar gives the airwaves to the Islamists and the airstrip to the Americans. He plays it right. So is Al Jazeera independent? After all that, a lot of scholars said, well, if Al Jazeera received its fund and its financial fund from the Emir of Qatar, so how can it be independent? And Al Jazeera, put a lot of coverage, strong coverage about the Arab leaders in the Arab world, but they didn't mention that Ali and Sharon were invited to Qatar. They didn't mention that there is an Israeli office in Qatar, so they wouldn't criticize Qatar. They would criticize everyone, but they wouldn't criticize Qatar. So is it independent? I'll leave the answer for you. But we should not neglect the influence of Al Jazeera and the significance of Al Jazeera. The network managed to position itself as an independent voice, proved to be unmatched in its ability to break political taboos, take on controversial issues, set the news agenda. Let's be honest, like before Al Jazeera, it's impossible to hear in an Arabic channel someone is criticizing an Arabic leader. It's impossible. Al Jazeera break these towers. Al Jazeera bring up some freedom. Yeah, we said it. Bring some space of freedom. But was it innocently, or was established, or was a political agenda behind it? I didn't have time here to speak about Al Jazeera English. I hope there are another time to speak about it. But in general, they are different because they are targeting different markets and different audience. So we cannot really apply what's being applied on Al Jazeera Arabic, on Al Jazeera English, because they are different. They are financed by the same source. The same source is financing them, but somehow they are different. Now, Al Jazeera and Arab Spring. A spokesman of WikiLeaks tweeted, yes, we may have helped Tunisia, Egypt, but let us not forget the elephant in the room, Al Jazeera last side dishes. Lynch, 2013, says that Barack Obama was following what's going on in Egypt by Al Jazeera. In Libya, Qatar's role in Libya, Qatar supported the rebels in Libya, and Al Jazeera helped the Qatar's policy in supporting the rebels as well. In Syria, Lynch says that after months of the Syrian revolution, Saudi Arabia's king called for an end to bloodshed in Syria. This is very interesting because they sent 1,500 troops into Bahrain, and now they are calling to stop the bloodshed in Syria. So it's all about politics. Al Jazeera was accused of, I know that I passed my time, but I'll just finish up. Al Jazeera was accused of fabricating some news about Syria. For example, they interviewed a lot of activists in Beirut, saying that they are in Damascus. So here, especially in the Arab Spring, Al Jazeera played a very biased role. In Bahrain, for example, while the Bahraini peaceful protesters were being killed and fired at, while Shia mosques were being demolished by Saudi troops, and while Shia villages were being attacked by Saudi tanks, Al Jazeera was airing images of calm streets in Manama. So this summarizes it all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes for questions. Any questions?
You spoke about the opposition in Bahrain. I because you were there, you were on the ground, do you see people calling for freedom still form any kind of power or in that kind of revolution in Syria?
The problem now has to do with what I didn't have time to deal with. It has to do also with some factions of the opposition itself. Because I mean, those local councils I spoke about, so the civil resistance faced restrictions from ISIS, the Islamic State, from Jabhat al-Nusra, from several factions of the Islamist hardline opposition, who repressed, kidnapped the activists who were calling for pluralist, inclusive society. So who's to blame for this? I mean, the question is quite complex, but for sure there are a set of reactionary conservative governments in the region, which includes the Syrian government, of course, as he wanted to. I mean, in my opinion, if you look also at how events evolved and how he set free hundreds of Islamists at the beginning of the uprising when they were not the leading force. So we have to look at the Gulf forces for sure, but we have to look as well at the Syrians and how this civil resistance has been killed in Syria today, unfortunately. And I think one of the, in recently, there was about some months ago, was a kidnapping of one of the main activists, Razan Zaytuna, which had a good relationship before with the military factions, but then in the end, when she started criticizing them,
and do you mean that when you say that this civil resistance has been killed, do you mean that there's no future for the civil resistance and you don't see it as an effective elements in the future of the Syrian?
unfortunately, they don't have the means to protect themselves because of all the funds, the weapons go to certain factions. They are the one who are privileged from donors, from Gulf donors and Turkish donors. They will never have the means to protect themselves. This was one, for example, was one of the reasons one secular leftist brigade, small brigade, was set up in Douma, in the suburbs of Damascus, where Fasad had a shop, the cause of the liberation, of the people liberation. It's a sort of a Nasrist ideology, sort of secular. But there, I mean, if you look at their pictures and their videos, they don't have weapons. It's really poor situations. If you're not growing your bird and posing in a certain way, exhibiting a certain ideology, you won't get money. You won't get funds. And that was a problem also with the Free Syrian Army. And now, if you look at the Free Syrian Army, it was a genuine expression of the revolution. It became a really weak faction, and it has no funds in comparison with the Saudi-backed factions.
I just noticed that in one of the videos that you displayed, there were 5 men sitting and they were deciding on the political and military division of governments.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, how did these men become the power brokers in the civil movements? Were they elected? Were they is it their social status, or what is it exactly?
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to cut the video was just before that part where they explained the electoral process, because actually those men were 11 people out of, they were selected by an electoral committee to draft a constitution, a provisional constitution, and then to discuss the issues of the community, including separation between the military and the politics. So there had been provisional and temporary elections, even though the situation is, it's a dramatic one, it's undershadowing, but still. And of course, as one of the aspects that also I mentioned, Omar Aziz, he mentioned as well, this activist mentioned the fact that tribal structure, tribal ties and family ties needed to be not abolished, but gradually overcome. So for sure, those elders were selected also according to tribal allegiance, they were more influential in the community. But what those activists were fighting for was also to overcome this selective methods so entrenched and so rooted in the Syrian society.
Yes.
Question for Zana. You mentioned the role of the US in Qatar. I'm just wondering, given the US's presence in Jaffa and Bahrain, have you seen any evidence that they were actively involved in one side or the other, or were they disinterested as long as there was stability?
Well, actually, that's a very good question, but I can't answer a definite answer. But they were trying to convince the United States was trying to convince the Bahraini the United States doesn't want to get rid of Al Khalifa family. They want them because they maintain their interests in Bahrain, but at the same time they don't want to support them openly. But the Saudi Arabia role is very influential and strong.
Yes, I was thinking, you know, with the tinsel capitalism of the Emirates, you know, in these small places where there's more spare cash,